Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and the good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners across the pond in Latin America and also in England as well as Canada. You know we love you so much, but Big C, there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And Big C is out on assignment tonight. He's going to be coming up on one of the big games this weekend, so I'll be running solo for this beautiful September 22nd, 2017 in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And there's so many things we talk about in the world of Big C Sports, as well as some politics that go on every now and then in the United States of America. Also, this good thing that's happening where we have this socially conscious athletes that are actually paying attention to what's going on in the neighborhoods that they actually come from, and hopefully we'll get this NFL and at least the conscious athletes to talk about doing some type of a accountability month. And they're thinking about the month of November, and all they're trying to do is get some of the athletes and the players and even law enforcement, the civic leaders, to get together and talk about what can happen in the world of sports and athletics and how it can bring our society together. I do want to say today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. And so obviously a lot of good things happening. Sam Bradford, if you look at the NFL, is his career already over? The Minnesota Vikings, he's going to miss his second straight week of the season. A reoccurring injury, meandering and he just has so many issues with that surgically repaired knee. It's been repaired twice, and you think about that. Also, some things in the NBA since 1981, Ronald Reagan's presidency. A championship team has enjoyed a ceremony at the White House. Will the Golden State Warriors break from that this year? We know what Coach Kerr said about Trump and his administration, and about the xenophobia and some of the sexism that goes on there, and some people say blatant racism, the way it attacks African Americans. So Jamil Hill of ESPN also calling Kaepernick. And so will they go to the White House? And will there be some players that don't attend? We'll have to see. I do want to say, speaking of NBA championships, David Stern, former NBA commissioner of the NBA, turned 75 years old today. So congratulations to David Stern at 75. Candles on that birthday cake. I'm sure you'll have a great time enjoying that. And as we look at also the NFL, and a lot of good things happening. If the Giants lose this weekend and go to 0-3, will they be calling for head coach Ben McAdoo's head? Obviously, a lot of coaches are on the hot seat in the college ranks, but the NFL ranks, a lot of people want to say the same thing. You look at what's happening with the Giants. They had Marshall, they had Odell Beckham, of course, Eli Manning, one of the best quarterbacks, at least on paper in the NFL. But if they get up to an 0-3 start, the New York fan is not going to see too kindly and being very friendly to that. Will they blame Manning or will they blame the coach? Oftentimes when things like that happen, we know they blame the coach, whether it's the coach's fault or not. But I think if you get off to an 0-3 start, that's going to make it really difficult. If you look around the NFL as well, Deshaun Watson, will he be the first rookie quarterback to ever defeat the New England Patriots in Foxborough this Sunday against the great Tom Brady? Didn't look too good, Tom Brady against Kansas City, the season opening Thursday night game, but really turned things around against the Saints down in New Orleans. Will the Dodgers in the Major League Baseball, they can clinch the NL West tonight, and will they get that done? Obviously, the Dodgers were the favorite for the World Series, at least to win it, and then the Cubs get hot. And when you talk about the Dodgers being the dominant team, at least on the West Coast, and the Cubs got hot, a lot of that attention turned away from the Dodgers, especially when they had the 11-game losing streak. So obviously a lot of good things to talk about in the world of sports. But you know, tonight's Friday, and ironically for a Friday night, you have college football, and we know that's supposed to be a night for high school kids to go out and enjoy themselves. And ironically, you have a great game tonight up in the state of Idaho. You have Boise State, and they're playing at home versus Virginia. And obviously a team coming out from the East Coast to play a West Coast team. Boise State, they've become kind of the bowl busters, what they call their bracket busters, because they've had the same kind of success against some of the bigger programs that they've had in their own Mountain West Conference. And in the first half, actually the first quarter, They were tied up at 7 going into the second quarter. They're tied at 7. So a lot of things happening in the world of NCAA football, and what we're going to do is go right into it and talk about some of the teams that are playing the FBS Division 1A schedule for this beautiful Thursday, September 21st. Temple's playing South Florida last night. That was a game that a lot of people wanted to see. USF, only Charlie Strong, 43-7 over Temple. This Friday, that matchup, you have Virginia at Boise State. That game's on ESPN2 at Albertson Stadium in Boise, Idaho. One thing you love about Boise or you hate about it, that blue turf, I would say it has to go. It messes with the eyes. I know even up in Washington, eastern Washington of all teams, they're at a lower level of football, but they have a red turf. And so you don't know if a guy's bleeding or if a guy actually has the colors that they have from the turf, Dixie. Obviously, I like to have the green. That's more tradition, but I'm a little bit old school when it comes to that. I would hate to see every school around college football starting to have their home colors on the field and making that the look that they think a lot of people want to get to. If that happened, could you imagine Alabama, ranked number 1 in the country, having a red turf down there at Bryant-Denny Stadium? I don't think they would go for that. Or Auburn playing on a blue turf, or Clemson, the defending national champions, having an orange turf. So obviously Boise made something unique. Everybody knows when they see the blue turf, they're talking about Boise State. Other matchups on Friday. Utah, ranked number 23 in the country, a Pac-12 power. They're playing at Arizona. That game's on Fox Sports 1, 7:30 p.m. start tonight. Utah's kind of quiet under the radar. They're a very good football team. I remember back in the day when they actually came out of the WAC conference, and they were always challenging BYU for who would win that WAC championship. But Utah's come on strong, especially playing in the Pac-12 where they have more public panache, they have more notoriety now. They came in with Colorado, and you have Colorado's undefeated. A lot of good teams in the Pac-12 this year, from USC to Washington, both undefeated. You have Oregon that's undefeated. Utah's undefeated. Washington State's undefeated. And when you look at teams that could be undefeated, you have to look at UCLA. I don't know how they lost the game at Memphis, but it was an early start. But a team that's also undefeated, Cal Berkeley's undefeated. They're playing USC this weekend. So a lot of things will happen in the Pac-12 conference this weekend as some of the undefeated teams will actually get a chance to play each other, and we'll find out who has more in store for at least chasing down the Northern Championship or the Southern Championship. A lot of people thought Washington and Stanford when we started the season. Stanford's still a good team. They did lose to USC and San Diego State. But Oregon's looking strong. Washington, of course, will be there, as well as Washington State in the North. So it's kind of talent-heavy in the North. You look at the South, of course, there's USC, UCLA. USC and Texas, was there a better college football game in the last several seasons, going down to the wire and then going into overtime, reminiscent of what happened when they played in 2005. And Texas and Vince Young came away with a national championship. And USC left a lot of points on the field in that game back in the day, even though Texas may say they earned it. There was a couple of plays where Texas had a running back's knee was down. He went into the end zone. And obviously that fourth and goal from the 7, you would have thought Frosty Rucker would just contain the outside and not fall for the fake going up in the gut by Vince Young. And when he ran to the corner, that was Frosty Rucker's territory. And Frosty Rucker's an NFL player. So obviously, but a great game no matter who you like. I think Sam Darnold, whether you love him or hate him, is he a Heisman Trophy candidate? Yes. Is he the best quarterback in the country? In my opinion, he's not. I think you still got to look over at Louisville. The guy down at Clemson can play. I like Browning up at Washington. There's just a lot of good players, and it's going to be determined by who wins at the end of the season. So it doesn't really matter what we think about right now. I do want to get back to some of the games coming up, these matchups that are happening on Saturday. I think Arizona wins it. Well, I won't say they'll win. I think Utah wins a close one at Arizona tonight. Down in the desert, a lot of crazy things have happened, though. But Utah has a good running game, and they're very well coached. I think they have the edge there. UNLV at Ohio State. What's happened to the Buckeyes? Preseason ranked in the top 2, depending on which poll. Someone had them 1, and most people had them between 3 and 1, of course. But they lost that big game at home to Oklahoma that really went in there, and Baker Mayfield put on a clinic, especially in the second half of that game. And Ohio State, they're not upset on an upset alert, not against UNLV. I know a lot of people down at UNLV, they bet, but not too many people are going to be betting on the Running Rebels in this game. I think that's a Buckeye win in a big way, again, a chance for them to show that they are an elite team. but realistically, they're probably the number 2 team in the Big Ten. Penn State's playing good football. North Carolina State on the road at number 12 Florida State. That game's at 9 a.m. on ABC Sports, also ESPN2. That will be at Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee, Florida. We know Florida's been hit hard with the hurricanes, but in Tallahassee, they haven't had the damage that you had down in Miami and some of the other coastal cities in Florida. North Carolina State, obviously, they have to have an upset on their mind, but it's not going to happen. Florida State's simply too good a team. I know they lost to Alabama, but everybody, when they play Alabama, they can say the same thing. I think Florida State losing their quarterback hurts a little bit, but they have too much talent for North Carolina State, and they should easily win that game. Kent State at Louisville. Louisville, number 19, took it on the chin last week against a good Clemson team that returning a lot of players on defense, and they're actually loaded. That's a 9 a.m. kickoff, and that's at Papa John's, Cardinal Stadium in Louisville, and they're on the ACC network. That's a game, obviously, that Louisville has to look to respond, and you know they probably will. They've had a lot of time to realize they were just up against a better team in Clemson, and not too many teams can play football the way Clemson plays it. I mean, they come back from last year, and there are a lot of people questioning, is Alabama going to get to the national championship game because they're ranked number 1 again? But you look at Clemson. What did Clemson do other than beat Alabama last second play, obviously, by Watson? But they hung with them. In the last 2 years, Clemson has played in the national championship game. I know a lot of people don't want to see the same 2 teams repeat, but if you had to take a bet to say who would get back there, would it be Clemson or Alabama? It's hard to bet against Alabama, but I don't think anyone's going to beat Clemson now that Florida State's playing with a second-team quarterback. So obviously they're going to have to get things going. But Louisville, they ran up against the buzzsaw last week, and they were at home, and they're at home again against Kent State. Should get a chance to lick their wounds. A good game. Great football, great offense. Texas Tech at Houston. That's a 9 a.m. start on ABC Sports, and that's a TDECU Stadium, and that should be a great environment because a lot of people in Houston's been suffering. They've been suffering because of the hurricane and the cleanup when you deal with FEMA and all the disasters that's going on in Houston. Obviously, college football is not an answer for everything, but I think on a great comeback Saturday where they can get their mind off of what's going on because a lot of people are still cleaning up, should be a game where Houston and Texas Tech can put up a lot of points. Don't know who can win that game because both teams can throw the football. We go to the next game, Army at Tulane. That's a game at 9 a.m. on CBS Sports Network at Yeoman Stadium in New Orleans, Louisiana. Obviously, Tulane is going to take a back seat when it comes to football in the SEC powers down south. Not going to have the same type of attention and not going to have the same type of interest. But Tulane can play decent football, and especially if they're at home. And the Army, you always want to root for the Cadets, but I think in this one you're going to find that Tulane maybe is in over their head. Even though they play well at home, I'm going to look for the Cadets to win that game coming up on this Saturday. And as we also look at college football across the pond, I tell you, there's nothing better than NFL football being played across the pond, but we'll get on that subject later. I do want to go back down to the world of college football. Texas A&M is at Arkansas, 2 teams from the SEC. That's a game on ESPN at 9 a.m. Summerlin, for some reason, was under attack. I think A&M, they have so much talent. They'll go in to Arkansas and most likely win that game at 9 a.m. start. And ESPN game, of course, AT&T Stadium, Arlington, Texas. So that's a game that both teams are going to be in Jerry Jones Dome to kind of have, it's going to neutralize home field advantage. But both teams will travel well. Texas A&M will most likely have the home field crowd just because they're still in the state of Texas. And I think Summerlin has a great defense. Offensively, they can score a lot of points. Just the game in UCLA, that was not a touchdown in the last seconds of the game. But you got to give credit to both teams who played in that game against UCLA and Texas. A lot like USC and Texas. UCLA, Texas A&M staged a great ball game. A lot of people love the ending of both of those games. But I look at Texas A&M against Arkansas getting the win in that one. We look at UMass going at Tennessee. That's a 9 a.m. start. And that game is on the SEC Network. Neyland Stadium, Knoxville. Over 100,000 fans should be in there. And Tennessee has to feel really bad from how they let the game against Florida get away. You're talking last minute, actually last second, where Florida threw, it wasn't even a Hail Mary. They just threw the ball deep. It was a route that they threw last year, and they found success against Tennessee's defense. But obviously, the game goes down to the wire. You can't feel too bad for losing to a Florida team that's very talented, but definitely they'll take it out on UMass coming up this weekend. West Virginia at Kansas. That game's 9 a.m. on ESPNU Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, Kansas. Kansas has a better football program in the spring because when they start to play other people, obviously they don't match up on the field. They leave it ready for the basketball season, and you feel for them because it's a great school. It's a great university, and when it comes to basketball, they're among the top in the country. But West Virginia should go in there and roll all over Kansas at Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, Kansas. Again, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was beaten up last week by Oklahoma State. Now they're at Georgia Tech, another team down from the southern part of the country. Georgia Tech, ACC team. You look at Pittsburgh, obviously blown out by Penn State, then blown out by Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State might be the best team in the Big 12. That game is going to be the ACC Network at Bobby Dodd Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. Beautiful Atlanta. Georgia Tech's downtown. Should be a game that Georgia Tech wins, especially the way they can run the football. Kind of an odd game, New Mexico at Tulsa. It's a 10:30 a.m. start, ESPN3, Chapman Stadium, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa has pretty decent football, but they're always going to be overshadowed by Oklahoma and also by Oklahoma State. A game where New Mexico goes in there, and they're in the Conference USA. I'm looking for Tulsa to get that win, and that should be a good game for that region of the country. Old Dominion at Virginia Tech, number 13 ranked in the country, Virginia Tech. 11 a.m. start on the ACC Network at Lane Stadium in Blacksburg, Virginia. Virginia Tech, obviously, very well coached, lots of speed. Michael Vick's alma mater. A lot of players go to Virginia Tech. And at one time, it was not known as a national power. But they obviously have everything that it takes to be a championship type of team. And we'll see how far they can go with the way they play defense down there in Blacksburg, Virginia. Idaho, looking out of the Mountain West at South Alabama. So Idaho going across the country. And that's 11 a.m. start on ESPN3 at Lee Peebles Stadium in Mobile, Alabama. Idaho obviously in over their head, perhaps because they traveled. Both teams are about the same talent level, but I'm going to give the edge to South Alabama. They may get some home cooking, and Big C, you know what it means to get home cooking in the South. It doesn't always mean that someone's going to invite you to the home. It means that someone's going to get some home cooking in the football game. So going to look at South Alabama getting that game done over Idaho. Maybe they'll bring some potatoes from Idaho and share some of that moonshine you good old boys do down south. Look at a few other games in college football. USF, Central Florida at Maryland. Maryland shocked Texas to open the season. Remember down in Texas, in the opening week, and Texas was expecting a win and to be undefeated going into the USC game. But University of Central Florida has a lot of talent. But I think Maryland's a little bit better team than people thought. And Maryland should get that game, especially there at home. That game's 12 o'clock p.m. on Fox Sports 1 at Maryland Stadium in College Park. There's still about 931 tickets left for that game. And for the game that everybody cares about, in the South at least, you have number one ranked Alabama. When has Alabama not been number one? Only it seems when they're knocked off by Ohio State or when they're knocked off by Clemson in the national championship game. But Alabama, could they be on an upset alert at Vanderbilt? SEC teams, maybe a game they're overlooking. Alabama just came off of two subpar opponents in Fresno State and then Colorado State, down to playing against an SEC team that may be physical, but maybe not as offensive-minded as even Fresno State and Colorado State. So I look for Alabama to roll on the road. They had a lot of home cooking this year, but this is their first time out on the road. That's at Vanderbilt Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. About 400 tickets remain for that one. And a big game that's coming up in the South as well. Boston College at number 2 Clemson. At 12:30 kickoff at ESPN2 Memorial Stadium in Clemson. About 300 tickets remain left for that game. And if Dabo Swinney has done anything, he's done this. He's shown the world that he knows how to win college football games. It's not just Deshaun Watson that made them so great last year. This team has a great defense. So a lot of people looking at Clemson getting back to the national championship game, I think they'll get knocked off because they have a young quarterback. But you can't say anything bad about their defense. They're simply amazing the way they play football. And you just wait for the young quarterback to make mistakes, even though he doesn't. He looks pretty sharp against the game that they played at Louisville. So obviously it's hard to get two teams back to back 3 years in a row. And we'll see if they can get that ball rolling, as they're going to probably have a decent win against Boston College. The game that I'll be checking out is number 5 USC out here on the West Coast. They're at the University of California, Berkeley, and that game's in Strawberry Canyon over in Berkeley. It should be a packed house at Berkeley, a team that doesn't normally sell out. But when USC comes to town, they normally have a sold-out crowd. That's a 12:30 p.m. kickoff. That game is on ABC Sports at Memorial Stadium. There's still about 700 tickets left for that game, but they'll have a good walk-up crowd at Cal Berkeley. And two great California programs. USC is a private school. California is a public school under the UC system. And I think when you look at the tradition of these two teams, you think about Chuck Muncie that played back in the day at Cal. You think about, all the talent that's come out of there. Kyle Bowler came out of Cal. Obviously, we like Aaron Rodgers, maybe the best quarterback to ever come out of there. They've had so much success at Cal Berkeley. They actually renovated their stadium several years ago. It's a gorgeous place to play, a gorgeous environment, and it should be a great day for college football. The weather should hold up in the Bay Area. USC, number 5 in the country. In my opinion, they're talent-wise among the top 2 or 3 teams. They're ranked number 5 because they had a bad start against Western Michigan. And then they had a big win against Stanford that also got beat by San Diego State. And the game at Texas could have gone either way, but I think USC left about 3 touchdowns on the scoreboard if they did not score, going for it on 4th and 1 trying to run up the gut. Maybe if they go for it on 4th and 1, they'll run in the corner because their running backs have the speed to do that. I think Sam Darnold's a good pocket passer, but you see if you roll him out, you also buy more time for the offense. This is a game where USC, they're going to find a team that's not as physical as Texas, but a team that can throw the ball in their own right. California knocked off SEC power Ole Miss just recently, and they went on the road and beat North Carolina in an early start. So this is a game that USC obviously gets up for, a game that they probably should win by at least 2 touchdowns, but they're going to have to score some points. They cannot get off to a shaky start the way they did against Western Michigan, and the same way they got off to a shaky start against Texas. They're going to have to take advantage of scoring opportunities. A great game coming up in the Big 12. Number 16 TCU. They're at number 16 Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, maybe being ranked in 6th in the country is not high enough when you look at how many points they can put up in a game. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, one of the better passing games. I would not be surprised at all if Oklahoma State finally wins the Big 12 conference. I know people are looking at Oklahoma, but Oklahoma always seems to find a way to lose a game when it matters most. And Texas is a good team athletically. We're going to have to see how their offense comes along. But I really like Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. I think they're very dominant, especially when it comes to throwing the football. The U seems back. The number 14 Miami Hurricanes ranked 14 in the country. Toledo's rolling into Miami at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida. They've changed the name so many times. That's on the ACC network. Gone are the guys that had Miami a must-see TV program back in the day when Schellenberger coached, and of course when Jimmy Johnson coached there, whether it's Michael Irvin or Warren Sapp or Alonzo Highsmith back in '83 when they could really run the football. I just look at Benny Blades. They had so many players. They even got some of the top talent out of California to go. That DJ Williams went there and played linebacker for them. The Rock played at Miami until Warren Sapp came on, and then the Rock decided he'd start taking movie lessons instead. But Miami has a very good team. They're never going to be the type of team they were under Johnson. I just don't think they're going to have that. A lot of those kids are going to Florida and Florida State now. But Miami, I'm telling you, they're a top program. They just need that big win over someone. Toledo's not going to give them that big win, but I'm going to look for Miami to win big against Toledo. Rutgers at Nebraska. Obviously, Nebraska having some issues and getting rid of their AD. Had the loss to Northern Illinois after playing Oregon. They were blown out by Oregon, but they came back and made it a closer game. That game's at Lincoln Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska, and it's on the Big Ten Network, a 12:30 p.m. start. When you look at Nebraska, I just think about how dominant they were under Tom Osborne and how many championships they won, national titles. Rutgers is out of the Big Ten as well. Probably should step out of that conference and go back to the ACC where they don't have to travel as far and play physical teams. ACC is more of a speed conference. I think Rutgers would have more of a chance of at least becoming a playoff team if they did that, or a bowl team. But look for Nebraska to win. It may not be a big win, but they should at least win by double digits, maybe a 10, 12-point win. And as we look also at another Big Ten team that has a lot of promise, at least the way they played Ohio State throughout the season. Look at Indiana. Indiana, the Hoosiers, they're expanding their stadium, Memorial Stadium in Bloomington, Illinois. There's only 57 tickets left for that game against a lower division team in Georgia Southern. So look at Indiana. They have the talent. They're building that program. I really like the way they're doing it, but they're not going to compete with Wisconsin. They're not going to compete with Michigan. They're not going to compete with Ohio State, maybe Michigan State, and they're definitely not going to compete with Penn State. So, but I do like what they're doing at Indiana. Should be decent football for the people in Bloomington this weekend. Wake Forest at Appalachian State, 12:30 p.m. start. ESPN3. Looking forward to Appalachian State stepping up in the division, a team that shocked the Wolverines back in the day, but it's not going to be that type of surprise if they win again. Wake Forest will go in there and handle that game. You have Duke at North Carolina, 12:30 p.m. start on ESPNU at Kenan Stadium in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Two of the best basketball matches in the history of college basketball. Duke, for football, they've actually had as much success or more than North Carolina over the past several years. And that's a game that's a kind of a toss-up, but because North Carolina is at home, look for North Carolina to find a way to win that game, even though Duke could pull the upset just as well. We'll bounce around to a few more teams in college football on Saturday. We'll touch on some NFL games coming up. We have Michigan, number 8 in the country, going to Purdue. That's a 1 p.m. start on Fox at Ross Stadium in West Lafayette and Indiana. Michigan, coached by Harbaugh, really good defense offensively. Not as dominant as we thought they'd be, especially after they had a big win over Florida to start the season. But I like Coach Harbaugh. Whether you win by 1 touchdown or by 4, you're still going to get that victory. And I like Harbaugh in big games. They'll beat Purdue at West Lafayette. Another game that's on the West Coast, you have the University of Nevada, the Wolfpack, going up to Pullman and play the Washington State Cougars, a 3 p.m. game. That's a Pac-12 network at Martin Stadium in Pullman, Washington. I remember a couple of years that Washington State went up to Nevada. Nevada beat them. In fact, they put 50 points on the board. Well, this might be a game where Washington State returns the favor. Both teams have good athletes. The Washington State with Falk just throws the ball too well, and I don't know how anyone can go up there and win unless maybe USC might be the only home loss they have this year. So look for Washington State to get that win over Nevada. Now, a game we talked about earlier, number 3, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's getting a lot of press just because of what they did to Ohio State on the road. They're at Baylor, a team that used to score a lot of points, but they're down. It's a 3:30 p.m. start on Fox Sports 1. If any team can be upset, I'm not saying it's going to be this weekend, but Oklahoma, that win at Ohio State may not be as dominant as a lot of people think it was as the season gets there, week number 7, 8, 9, and we'll find out more as in the Big Ten. You'll see a lot of people starting to challenge what's going on with Ohio State too. It won't just be that Oklahoma went there and beat them. This might be their first double loss season in a long time under Urban Meyer. And so I'm going to, of course, go with Oklahoma, but I think they're living on the win that they had at Ohio State, and it's not that impressive as the season goes on. Number 17, Mississippi State, at number 11, Georgia, 2 SEC powers. It's an ESPN game at 4 o'clock p.m. at Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia. And Mississippi State, the way they beat up on LSU, and Georgia had a close win at Notre Dame, I'm not so sure that Georgia can beat Mississippi State at home. Not the way they run the football and the way they play defense. If you look at how they smashed LSU, LSU probably has better athletes than Georgia. It would be an upset numbers-wise, but not an upset on the field. We'll find out on Saturday, but I'm going to give the edge to Mississippi State to go in there and knock off Georgia, the Bulldogs. Should be a great game no matter what. San Diego State on the West Coast, ranked number 22 in the country, at the Air Force Academy, 4 o'clock p.m. on CBS Sports Network at Falcon Stadium at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. Obviously, the altitude may play a difference. San Diego State can flat out run the football. Any team that can beat Stanford running the football, you got to take them going on the road, whether they can hold up with the altitude being a little bit more difficult. But I do like San Diego State. They won the WAC conference last year. Marshall Faulk's alma mater, and they're really doing some good things down there. It's a shame that the people in San Diego have to watch San Diego State when they want to see football because the Chargers obviously went up to Carson, California. But that's the way it happens in the world of sports. One of my favorite teams, last year's Rose Bowl runner-up, number 4 Penn State. They're at Iowa. Iowa's at the 4:30 p.m. kickoff in Iowa. ABC TV at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City. About 300 tickets left for that game. Penn State, they've dominated everyone they've played, even had USC down by 10 points going into the Rose Bowl in the fourth quarter, and then the Trojans pulled out the win with a late second field goal, some great plays by Sam Darnold. But I look at Penn State being ranked number 4 in the country, most likely will win the Big Ten championship. I think they're better than Ohio State. I think they're better than Michigan. Definitely they should be better than Iowa. So I look for Penn State to go in there and get that win. And obviously, this is a team, if they don't win the Big Ten, then they should at least get a top bowl game. But I think they were hurt last year for becoming Big Ten champions, and then they got snubbed by the bowl committee, and they did not let them play in the playoff system. And obviously, I think they're still smarting from that. Auburn, number 15 in the country, playing at Missouri. That's a 4:30 p.m. kickoff on ESPNU Memorial Stadium, and that is at Colorado. Should be a good win by Auburn. Number 20, Florida, still happy and smarting from that last second win against Tennessee. They're at Kentucky, a 4:30 p.m. kickoff on the SEC Network, Commonwealth Stadium. Look forward to Florida keeping it going in the SEC. What a big win that they had when they had to come from behind and outscore a great Tennessee program. So they should really be feeling themselves and going into the Kentucky and getting another win there. Out to the West Coast, I'm going to look at, it's hard to think about this. Washington ranked number 7 in the country at Colorado, and both of these programs won championships back-to-back in the 90s. 90 and 91, you had Colorado and Washington winning national championships. Even though they didn't play for it, they were voted in. This is a big game for the Huskies. Both teams undefeated. That's a 7 p.m. kickoff, so it's a late start on Fox Sports 1 at Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado. There's still about 650 tickets left. Jake Browning can flat throw the football. Washington's defense is why they win. Even though they have last year they were touting this guy as a Heisman Trophy candidate, Browning's probably one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the country, especially the way he throws. He had over 90 touchdown passes as a high school player at Folsom in California, in Northern California, Division I football. But they're going into Colorado. It's a little bit thin. Colorado plays good football there. But I still think Washington, and again, these teams played last year, and I think that Washington is just going to go in there and win that game, both teams being undefeated. But it's a game for Chris Peterson to show that he's a great coach. I think they learned so much by losing to Nick Saban in Alabama, how to go on the road and win. And when they lost them in last year's playoff game, 24-17, they actually played Alabama close in the first 3 quarters, and then they had turnovers. I think Washington has a better moxie than Colorado, and I think they'll go in there and get the win because of Coach Peterson and that defense, even though Browning gets a lot of credit. Number 24, Oregon at Arizona State. That game's at 7 p.m. in the Pac-12 Network. Sun Devil Stadium, Tempe, Arizona. Arizona State's not the same program they've had over the years. Oregon, they're rolling again. They score a lot of points. Defensively, Oregon could be tighter on defense, but I do look for Oregon going into the desert at night and getting a win. Both teams can score, but I just think Oregon's going to outscore them, maybe even a double-digit win down in the desert. And you have UCLA against Stanford. That game's on the Forum. Both teams off to a disappointing season. I look at UCLA and that loss at Memphis. It was an early start, but his game where Rosen did not look like the Heisman Trophy quarterback that they've been touting him to be. And then you look at Stanford. If you take away the loss they had, I mean, they've only lost to ranked teams. They blew out Rice down in Australia. I think it was 62-7. They were blown up by USC at the Coliseum. 2 teams that are very physical and know each other very well. And then they lose on the road at San Diego State, which people might think that's an upset, but San Diego State won the WAC championship last year, a team that has shown that they know how to play football. This is a must-win for both teams. And I tell you why. Both teams have aspirations of still winning a Pac-12 championship. Stanford's loss was to the Pac-12 South USC. UCLA cannot afford to go up to Stanford and lose a game because they still have to come back and play USC at the end of the year. I think Stanford can get back on track. They're at home. I think UCLA, for all of their talent, UCLA is not known as a team that's going to be more physical than anyone. They're just a team that's going to play good football. They're going to get their quarterback a lot of hype because he can throw the football very well. But you got to play defense, and you got to run the ball to win, especially in the Pac-12 where people think it's a passing conference. It's the running teams that have the chance to win the conference championship. I'm going to look at Stanford winning that game. It's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff in Stanford on the Forum. There's only about 40 tickets left for that game. It's an ESPN game, and it should be a fantastic atmosphere for a football played in Northern California. We'll have to make sure that everyone tunes in on that and pay attention to what happens in the Pac-12 conference. We're going to take a quick break on the Big C Sports Network and come right back, and we're going to talk the NFL and run down a couple of games and get your thought. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to the show. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, and we just capped a lot of what's happening in the world of sports for college football. And one of the main reasons we love the weekend is because the NFL is back in town. But I want to go down to San Francisco, Santa Clara last night. Had a great game on Thursday night ESPN football. I see the NFL Network had the game with the LA Rams going into San Francisco or Santa Clara. And it was a shootout game for both teams. 41-39, the Rams get the win, and Hoyer was 332 yards passing. Gurley, I thought he was maybe the player of the game with 113 yards controlling the ground game, and Pierre Garçon 142 yards receiving in that contest. Obviously, both teams, I'm telling you, the Rams, the way they can play defense, they give up a lot of points, but they're always in it. Their offense scores a lot of points, even though they had the last two wins. They scored over 40 points against the Colts and also the 49ers. I know a lot of players on both teams are young, especially at the quarterback position. I thought Goff played decent football last night. The 49ers have some good receivers, but it's going to take time for both programs to build up. But I would not be surprised if you think about it. And I know it may seem like a far-fetched conclusion, but when you look at the NFC West, and you know, when you realize that Gurley can be an NFL Hall of Famer if you just let him run the ball and develop his running skills, he has that type of running ability. He reminds me of Lawrence McCutcheon and even an Eric Dickerson. If he's running the ball and averaging 100 yards, it's going to make it easier to pass, so that's going to help them a lot. You look at the Seattle Seahawks, their defense is great, but San Francisco hung close with them. Arizona's old and beaten up. Carson Palmer, maybe his last year. If you look at San Francisco, still a young team. Who's the most dominant offense in the NFC West? If you look at the numbers, you got to look at the LA Rams. I know people may laugh at that because Seattle's defense is so strong, and I think when they play a team that can, but look, Seattle has not scored over 14 points in their games this year. If you can get 2 touchdowns, you might beat the Seattle Seahawks. Now that's a tough thing to do, but a lot of teams that average 40 points a game in the last 2 games in the Rams, I wouldn't say that you can hold them under 21. I know a lot of people may laugh at that, but keep your eyes on what happens if they continue to run Targoli. I think it's going to be difficult for anyone to beat the Rams, especially if they're going to always get 21 points in the game the way they run and throw the football. Just my opinion, the only chance or the only problem is can their defense keep people down. We have Baltimore at Jacksonville. That's a 6:30 a.m. game at Wembley Stadium in London. Now, on the West Coast, to get up and watch a game that early for NFL football is great for the NFL to expand their brand. But it's not great for athletes to have to get on a plane and fly 12 hours to play a game in England and then fly back. Baltimore is a good start, off to a good start. So is Jacksonville. The body clocks are a little bit different. In this game, there's no home field advantage because both teams are so far across the pond, and they know they love the Big C Sports Show in England. And I think they're going to see a good defensive matchup with Baltimore and Jacksonville. Going to go with Baltimore to get that win. Denver. When you look at Denver at Buffalo, a 10 a.m. start on CBS Sports at New Era Field in Buffalo. The Buffalo Bills have a good team, Shady McCoy. Denver's defense, whenever you have Von Miller on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to put pressure on you. But Buffalo is at home. Denver had a big win over the Dallas Cowboys. They probably gave up. That game was a thunderstorm. Just everything weird that could happen happened in that game. But I do look at Denver going on the road and beating Buffalo just because they're going to bring their defense with them. And they might even bring some of that stuff they bring up in the Mile High too, Big C, if you understand what I'm saying. But I do like Denver's defense. If you look at the last 11 Super Bowls, the team with the number 1 defense won the game. I think 9 of the last 11 times. I look at Denver bringing that defense wherever they go, and it might be too much for Buffalo to overcome. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Big Ben Roethlisberger at Chicago. A 10 a.m. start at CBS Sports Soldier Field, Chicago. I think the Steelers, when you have a passing game, the way they can throw the football, and Le'Veon Bell is stepping into his own again, and Antonio Brown, maybe the best receiver in the NFL. We know Big Ben can throw the football. Coach Tomlin's teams are always well coached. I look for Pittsburgh to go in there and make easy work of Chicago in an early game actually. But the Steelers, They're a very good-looking football team. They're always kind of written off, but this is a good football team, and I look for them to go in there and do a lot of good things this year. We look at Atlanta. If Atlanta's not the best team in the NFC, I don't know who is, because that Super Bowl hangover that a lot of people talk about, how the Super Bowl team that loses doesn't get back to the playoffs the next year, Atlanta can just put a stop to that. With Matt Ryan throwing the football, they have Julio Jones, they have the Freeman in the backfield, they have great defense. This is a team that plays sideline to sideline as well as anyone. And their running game is strong, their offense is strong. They're not really known for their defense, but they shut down Green Bay, and Green Bay made a late run with Aaron Rodgers to make the game closer. But that's a team that I think can go anywhere and win. But they're going into Detroit, and that's at Ford Field, a 10 a.m. start. You have Matthew Stafford. Their wins have not been as impressive. They beat Arizona with a come-from-behind win, and they beat, on the road, the New York Giants, which are abysmal. They're winless. Stafford's numbers look good because they throw the ball a lot in Detroit. But I think Atlanta, if any team can go in there and win, I look at Ryan out-dueling Stafford in the Dome. Both teams play in the Dome, even though the Mercedes-Benz Dome, or Mercedes-Benz Stadium, is the most beautiful in the world. I look at Atlanta going to Detroit and getting that win. Maybe a close game, but Atlanta's a lot better than the Giants. They're a lot better than the Cardinals that they had to come from behind to beat the Cardinals. And we know how bad the Cardinals look. So look for Atlanta to go in there and get that win against Detroit. Cleveland at Indianapolis, I don't really know which way to go. It might be a game that Cleveland wins. Indianapolis has a lot of problems. That game's a 10 a.m. start on CBS Sports, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Now, Cleveland has a young quarterback, and I think he can throw the ball against this Indianapolis defense. A lot of things happen when you don't have your best player, Andrew Luck, money-wise and even just morale-wise. They don't seem to be the team that we thought they'd be. I'm going to look at Cleveland going in there on a 10 a.m. start at Lucas Oil Field and getting a win over Indianapolis. I would not be surprised at all if they do that. They're a young team, they're an up-and-coming team. It might be nice to see them go in there and do that. Tampa at Minnesota. Tampa was Winston throwing the football the way he does. Minnesota has a good run game. We saw what Minnesota did against New Orleans when New Orleans went in there. They can throw the football in Minnesota, but they have some injuries, of course. But they can count on a running game with Cook, can run the football. That's a 10 a.m. start on Fox Sports, US Bank Stadium, Minneapolis. Another gorgeous brand new football stadium, state-of-the-art stadium, and home of this year's Super Bowl game. So I look for Tampa to go in there and get the win because of Winston. I think he'll make more plays than Minnesota will running the ball. Houston, obviously, this whole southern part of the United States is galvanized behind the Texans. They're going to New England. Now, can Deshaun Watson beat Tom Brady at New England? You bet he can, but will he? No. It's hard to beat anyone at New England. They're the most dominant football team at home in the last decade, and Tom Brady obviously finding his rhythm. That game is going to be on CBS Sports at 10 a.m. start at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. There's still about 700 tickets left for that game, but that's a game, obviously. You have the top defense in Houston. J.J. Watt doesn't have a sack yet, neither does DeVay and Cowling. I don't think they're going to get to Tom Brady because they're just a hard team to beat at home, no matter who they're playing. I got to go with New England not to give up a loss at home to a rookie quarterback. Should be a good game if Watts can throw the football, but I look for New England, of course, to win that game at home. You have Miami at New York. The Jets are in trouble. They're trying to rebuild, and I know Bowles has had a lot of young players and experience there, but they just don't look like they can match up. Miami actually had a good game, and they won in Southern California, so I look for Miami to travel to New York and have a win on the West Coast and the East Coast. A 10 a.m. start on CBS Sports. That's at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And when you have the Jets and you have the Giants and you have teams that haven't put together success in the first 3 weeks of the season, it might just continue to linger on for the fans in New York. The big game in the NFC East, you have the New York Giants. They're playing at Philadelphia. Carson Wentz actually looks like a better quarterback this year than he did last year. Eli Manning, I don't think you can say Eli's coming to town, so therefore it gives the Giants a chance. Beckham, obviously back, but he still has a little bit of soreness in his lower extremities. And then Marshall, I thought the Giants would challenge for the NFC East Championship, but something's missing with that team. There's a spark. Something's just not working there. And I'm going to go with Philadelphia to get that win. And again, that's 10 a.m. start on Fox Sports. Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, and should be a good game to decide who's going to position themselves to be at the top of that division. The New Orleans Saints at Carolina. Cam Newton, former MVP of the league, obviously rusty because he had the shoulder surgery, didn't have the best time I guess the last couple of games have not been barn burners. But when you have a good offensive line that can protect you and good running games, the defense is always legit, even though they don't have Olsen, who has a broken ankle, I believe. But they're still a good team at home. New Orleans, you know Brees is going to throw the ball, but that's really all they have. When you know he's going to throw the ball a lot, you're going to have the dime package. I just think that at home, Carolina will find a way to win that game. It's a 10 a.m. start on Fox Sports at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, and look forward to seeing two great quarterbacks going at it. Here's a game that I think Seattle will get their second loss. I like Seattle when the season began, but Russell Wilson is not the same Russell Wilson from the Super Bowl. And their offensive line can't block, and that's why. Their running game hurts. Their defense is great, but they're going up against Marcus Mariota and the Tennessee Titans, who can flat out throw the football. And they also have a good running game. And that game's a 1:05 p.m. start on Fox Sports at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. But I do look at Tennessee being one of the dominant teams that's coming out of the South. And Seattle traveling across the country. Now, the Raiders did it, went in there and won, but the Raiders can score points. But Seattle can't score points. If Seattle gets 14 points, you're going to tell their defense they're going to have to stop Mariota from scoring 14 or 15. I don't think that can happen. I think Seattle's not a great team on the road, especially when it's an early game. And I look at Tennessee getting the win at home, even though talent-wise on defense you would think is the game that Seattle wins. But offensively, Tennessee's much better offensively than Seattle. Pete Carroll's going to have to do some things, maybe even fire someone on that offensive line, because all the moonshine they make off of the Seattle Seahawks, the fish and moonshine, could you imagine that, Big C? But I look at Tennessee getting that win. I think they're just a better offense. Andy Dalton, Cincinnati at Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, Andy Dalton, you have two great quarterbacks. I'm definitely going to go with Rodgers, a 1:25 p.m. start at Lambeau Field. And they still have about 1,100 tickets left for that. But Dalton's having some issues. I think Aaron Rodgers is great, and they'll be great again at home. Kansas City with Alex Smith going into Los Angeles playing the Chargers at a 27,000-seat stadium in Carson, California. I don't think that's fair, but that's where they're going to play the game, so they're going to have to play where they put them. I would think, and it may sound crazy, but it's no more crazy than playing in front of 27,000 seats. If the organization, the Chargers, made up with the fan base in San Diego, I'm sure they'd take them back. At least they'd play in front of 65,000. I know there's a lot of money on playing with teams are paying money to move locations, but the city of Los Angeles will not embrace the San Diego Chargers as the Los Angeles Chargers. And they need to figure that out now, because you can't sell out 27,000 seats. What makes you think they're going to sell out a 70,000 seat stadium in Los Angeles? You can make a U-turn and go right back down Interstate 5 and go into San Diego the same way they left, and make up with the fans and work on getting a new stadium, because you can't just take your product on the road and think people are going to support you. That's just my opinion. And I'm going to look at Kansas City going into LA and getting the win over the Chargers down there. But the Chargers can flat out throw the football, but Alex Smith is playing great. Their defense is great. I really like what they're doing. A game that I think a lot of people are looking forward to, the Oakland Raiders traveling across the country. The Oakland Raiders traveling across the country to play the Washington Redskins. And that's a game where Kirk Cousins and you have Carr. Carr's obviously a better quarterback. Cousins, a $100 million guy. Carr's a $100 million quarterback. Crabtree can catch anything you throw at him, it seems. And I really like the way Beast Mode brings energy to the Oakland offense. I think they have enough to go on the road and win the same way they did it last year. I think Carr's only lost one game on the road since he's been a starter. Nothing like that to build your confidence to be able to go on the road. I think Tennessee's a better team than Washington. It's a 5:30 p.m. start, so the Raiders won't have to deal with that lag time. Their body clock will be adjusted at FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland. It's not like the same crowd effect they had at RFK Stadium. I think the Raiders go in there and win. It won't be a shootout. I think the Raiders will get into the 30s. You're going to have to score over 30 to beat the Raiders, even if they give up 20. I still see the Raiders with a double-digit win at Washington in a game that a lot of people might say, well, Kirk Cousins is a top quarterback. I think they're going to show that he's not in this game against the Raiders, and I'm definitely going to take the Raiders in that game. Should be a great game. Remember the Super Bowl when the Raiders beat the Redskins back in the day when Marcus Allen rushed for nearly 200 yards. And the Monday night matchup is Dallas at Arizona. Dallas obviously smarting from their loss that they had, and they went up to the great state of Colorado, and all the smoke in the air, I don't know if it's from the forest fires or what it was, but they played like they were too relaxed. But obviously Dallas can't do that again, and when you have players giving up on an interception, that's just not going to turn it for Dallas. I think they're going to get more focused against an Arizona team that's beaten up. That's a 5:30 p.m. time on ESPN at University of Phoenix Stadium down in Glendale, Arizona. So all the things that are going on in the world of sports, obviously we love talking about football and basketball and baseball, and a lot of good things going on that you can pay attention to coming up. We'll have our partner Big C back on next week. But I do want to tell you, we thank you for all the things that you brought to the world of sports. We thank all of our listeners for Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network. And as we tell you, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe according to Big C and the good old boys down south. We want to tell you, there's never any reason for domestic violence. If you know anyone going through that garbage or any man, just call 911 because no one should have to deal with that on their own. And as we tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope you have a super fantastic day.